In the Roaring '20s, Al Capone ruled an empire of crime in the Windy City. Gambling, prostitution, bootlegging, bribery, narcotics trafficking, robbery, protection rackets, and murder. And it seemed that law enforcement couldn't touch him. Born of an immigrant family in Brooklyn, New York in January 1899, Al Capone quit school after the 6th grade and associated with a notorious street gang, becoming accepted as a member. Johnny Torrio was the street gang leader, and among the other members was Lucky Luciano. About 1920, at Torrio's invitation, Capone joined Torrio in Chicago, where he had become an influential lieutenant in the Colosimo mob. In 1925, Capone became boss when Torrio, seriously wounded in an assassination attempt, surrendered control and retired to Brooklyn. Capone had built a fearsome reputation in the ruthless gang rivalries of the period, struggling to acquire and retain racketeering rights to several areas of Chicago. That reputation grew as rival gangs were eliminated or nullified, and the suburb of Cicero became, in effect, a fiefdom of the Capone mob. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre on February 14, 1929, might be regarded as the culminating violence of the Chicago gang era, as 7 members or associates of the Bugs Moran mob were machine-gunned against a garage wall by rivals posing as police. The massacre was generally ascribed to the Capone mob, although Al himself was in Florida. Capone appeared before the federal grand jury in Chicago on March 20, 1929, and completed his testimony on March 27. As he left the courtroom, he was arrested by agents for contempt of court, an offense for which the penalty could be 1 year in prison and a $1,000 fine. He posted $5,000 bond and was released. On February 28, 1931, Capone was found guilty in federal court on a contempt of court charge and was sentenced to 6 months in Cook County Jail. His appeal on that charge was subsequently dismissed. On June 16, 1931, Al Capone pled guilty to tax evasion and prohibition charges. He then boasted to the press that he had struck a deal for a 2.5-year sentence, but the presiding judge informed him he, the judge, was not bound by any deal. Capone then changed his plea to not guilty. On October 18, 1931, Capone was convicted after trial and on November 24th was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, fined $50,000, and charged $7,692 for court costs, in addition to $215,000 plus interest due on back taxes. The 6-month contempt of court sentence was to be served concurrently. On November 16, 1939, Al Capone was released after having served 7 years, 6 months and 15 days, and having paid all fines and back taxes. Suffering from paresis derived from syphilis, he had deteriorated greatly during his confinement. Immediately on release, he entered a Baltimore hospital for brain treatment and then went on to his Florida home, an estate on Palm Island in Biscayne Bay near Miami, which he had purchased in 1928. Following his release, he never publicly returned to Chicago. He had become mentally incapable of returning to gangland politics. In 1946, his physician and a Baltimore psychiatrist, after examination, both concluded Capone then had the mentality of a 12-year-old child. Capone resided on Palm Island with his wife and immediate family, in a secluded atmosphere, until his death due to a stroke and pneumonia on January 25, 1947.